Eddie, what's going on, man? How's Australia right now?
Well, Australia is, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's summer here. And I'm in Melbourne, the city of Melbourne. Uh, and today is a Wednesday night, so it's my younger daughter does gymnastics. So I'm talking to you while just imagine a 10-year-old flipping around on crash mats
Nice.
just over there. And so it's perfect timing. Australia's good. Everybody, all 24 million of us are very happy.
It's I forget that it's summer over there. It is I'm in LA now and it's like high 40s. So it's practically a blizzard here in LA. Oh,
Right,
wait.
right.
You do Celsius though, right? Does Australia
Yeah.
do Celsius? So that would be really
Well,
hot.
you asked that like, does Australia do Celsius? I got good news for you. Everyone does Celsius.
That's true.
It's like, oh, is it Australia that does Celsius? Like, dude, you're the United States of America, I think, is the only place that does Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm 6 feet tall and it's 42 degrees outside.
We do that. We do that.
Okay.
Yes, Fahrenheit 40. I know the freezing point of water is about
32-ish, I
34,
think. 32.
32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Okay, so 40, that's like, what you're about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. It's not that hot here, but it's about 21 degrees. I would say it's like 72 and sunny.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. That's normal LA weather at least. Well, we've already done time math and we've done temperature math so far in our
And that's great.
relationship. This has been nice.
I know it's good. It's a real meeting of cultures.
Yeah, man, I'm so pumped for you to do this. This is how you started writing Beetlejuice across the country, right? I mean, you had to do weird hours and weird time conversions when you were writing.
Yeah, and because like it was a big opportunity for me. I'd just literally been buying a plane ticket to New York maybe 3 times a year and just going over and seeing stuff and trying to meet people and trying to get on, that great big imaginary writer list in the sky. And when I finally got the chance to pitch on Beetlejuice and then I got the job of Beetlejuice, there was a lot of like juggling different time zones.
Yeah.
And not just with me, but we had like writers. One of our book writers, Anthony, is in Los Angeles, so he's over there on the West Coast. We had a few people over on the East Coast, um, and then Australia was a whole different kettle of fish. And no one really wanted to, think about Australia or the time difference in Australia. So, and I didn't want to have any of my new collaborators have to think about
Yeah.
Australia in any way. So I just ate it on everything. I was like, if I have to do a meeting at 4 a.m., that's what I'm doing. And I used to go to there's a few nice parks around where I live in Melbourne, and so I've got quite like a loud voice, so I couldn't be in my house. I'd wake my wife and kids up, so I would just get my skateboard and go down and do a meeting in the middle of the woods, and people would be like, "What the fuck is that? I can hear birds going crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, man. I'm in the jungle. It's pitch black. Can't see anything. Let's write a musical."
Yeah, so take me back to that time before Beetlejuice. You said you were taking trips to New York. When did you had created so much at home? When did you think I want to branch out?
Well, it was always a dream, but I didn't quite know how to make it happen.
Mm,
And um, Australia Australia is an incredibly, especially the city of Melbourne, is a really creative city.
yeah.
Has amazing live music, amazing contemporary art and theatre scene, incredible visual art scene. It's a UNESCO World Capital for Literature. It's a happening place. Um, and theatre arts are huge in this city and in Australia, but um, because of the relatively low population and the huge expense of making musicals, we don't really make musicals here. It's something that has never happened. Probably mostly because of cost, but because of cost, there is a real drain in terms of knowledge and knowing how to workshop musicals here. Um, so it often doesn't happen. Like even if you think of a giant, like a slam dunk kind of commercial musical like Wicked, when it comes to Australia, it still has to move around in order to make itself work financially. So it'll do, even if a massively successful show might do a year in Melbourne, but then it's got to go to Sydney and then it's got to go to Brisbane,
Yeah.
um, just kind of run out of people quite quickly. So the numbers don't really work with musicals. Um, and I had written a couple, I'd done a lot of solo kind of comedy cabaret work where I, stand up and songs and one man show type things. And then I'd written a musical myself where I'd written the music, the book and the lyrics and, um, kind of fought to get that on. And that was really, really great, but a lot of hard work and no collaboration. And I was sort of really craving to work collaboratively with writers and designers and directors, in a proper shared capacity. And I just finished writing a few songs for the stage adaptation of Baz Luhrmann's Strictly Ballroom the musical,
Mm.
and it wasn't a great success. And I think part of the reason, which seemed obvious at the start, became more obvious as it went along, was that um, there was no one approach to the score. It was sort of a bowerbird approach where Baz would sort of get lots of different people to write songs. And
Yeah.
so I wrote a few songs for that. And that was a great experience working with him. And it was great to work on a commercial musical, even one that, didn't end up necessarily being, hugely commercially successful. But to work at that level was amazing. But I was like, I want to get my hands on a whole score. And so I was moping around, and my wife just said, buy a ticket and go to New York. I didn't know anyone. I didn't really know anything. I just sort of started turning up. It's one of those things where, like, you can try and do things remotely and, uh, but, especially at the time, New Yorkers are busy. They don't really respond unless you're right there in front of them.
Mm.
And then they'll talk to you, they'll deal with you. But, so I would just go and I'd have meetings with anybody, to, absolutely anyone, and see everything and start to, get a feel for what kind of work was working on Broadway, what wasn't, who was interesting as a director, and, sort of educating myself on how the whole thing worked. And just, I don't know what there's a real energy about turning up at places. I don't know what it is. There's a couple of hokey sayings about it, fortune favors the brave, and, when you leap, the net appears, and all that kind of bullshit. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but I do believe there is an energy in turning up. And I just kept kind of turning up and knocking on doors. And then I finally got an opportunity with Beetlejuice to pitch, and I just wrote my ass off on it. I just turned myself inside out, writing the two songs that I pitched to them. Actually, ended up writing three songs. I wrote the whole being dead thing for Beetlejuice,
Right.
and then I wrote dead mom for the character of Lydia, and then I had this idea for an opening number which they hadn't asked me to write, but I just wrote it and sent it to them anyway. A song that was eventually cut, but it was called "Death's Not Great," and it was
Yeah.
sort of an ensemble Les Miserables style number. And yeah, then I didn't hear anything, and then they just gave me the gig. I'd never met anybody. I'd spoken to people on the phone, but nobody. I was like, could have been anyone. I could have had like a whole bunch of. I could have been running like a music theater sweatshop. Just
Yeah,
have
it feels like you just skipped
50
1,000
writers.
steps. It feels
Yeah,
like
I did.
you
Yeah,
skipped 1,000 steps in telling me the story of how you got Beetlejuice. That's what it feels like.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah.
What
I
were
just kind of
the
like,
when you got the opportunity to write spec for Beetlejuice, like what were the prompts that you were given?
what was it at the time? We talked a lot about the film. We talked a lot about Scott and Anthony, who are the book writers, about what their new direction was going to be, putting Lydia front and center. And we spoke about what sort of territory that was emotionally. And then we spoke about how we thought Beetlejuice might function in the show. And um, we spoke about how in the film Beetlejuice, the character Beetlejuice doesn't actually sort of come on screen until like maybe 16, 17 minutes into the film. But because this was, Beetlejuice the musical, there was a real impetus to have him there from the beginning, and what would that be like? And
Right.
then we talked about what the bad version of Beetlejuice would be, um, and what the pitfalls might be. And then we talked a little bit sonically about how it might sound. And I remember we were talking about, obviously naturally talking about Danny Elfman and his incredible score for Beetlejuice. And Alex Timber, the director, said, kind of like Carnival, circus, a little bit Oingo Boingo. And I was like, I didn't know Oingo Boingo was like Danny Elfman's band.
Mm.
So I was like, yeah, Oingo Boingo. Yeah, I know what you mean. For some reason, I like thought that was just like a weird, like a descriptive term for
Yeah.
kind of creepy, squelchy, and it really set off, and it really influenced the whole being dead thing. And it wasn't until, like embarrassingly, I would say like years later, I worked out that Oingo Boingo was Danny Elfman's band, and I could have just gone and listened to his band, but I was like, no, Oingo Boingo, I don't know what that means. So that's what we talked about.
Yeah, I mean they're so great. Let's talk for a second about Beetlejuice, the demos, the demos, the demos. Um,
Oh yeah,
I mean, I I hate sending demos to my friends. And whenever I do, I send them with like 18 disclaimers of what I already knows bad about them. What
yeah.
it's like kind of unheard of to post demos like that. What inspired you to do that? And just on behalf of myself, I am so grateful that you did. I have learned so incredibly much from listening to them. What inspired you to post demos like that?
There was a couple of reasons for it. One was the big reason, the big motivation that got me past the fact that they were never intended to be released or broadcast or really heard from anyone but heard by anyone but my collaborators. And even as you said before my phone overheated, like even sending them to my collaborators, there's a kind of a divine madness that happens when I make demos where I kind of create this sonic world. The song exists, the characters exist. I get to play all the characters. I spend all day on my own creating the demo and living in this kind of world, and then doing stupid voices and ad libs and jokes and playing, guitar solos and doing BVs and all sorts of. It's a really fun process, and I love it.
Yeah.
And then when I send it off, I always have a moment just before I hit send where I'm like, "Oh, this is pretty weird what I've done. This is pretty niche." But you get to a point where you trust your collaborators, and it's just sort of fine to send things through. So going
Yeah.
that step to release it to other people was a weird one. We were in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm.
The show was going to get shut down by the Music Man, and then the pandemic shut everything down, and nothing was happening. And every show was in a box, and no one knew when it would be back. And we had, when we closed on the 12th of March 2020, because of the pandemic, the show was sold out every night, and it was an amazing vibe in there.
Yeah.
And we had these incredible fans who were really hungry for lots of any information we can give them about, the creation of the show or how we thought about the show. And I would read along to what people had written, I wonder why they chose that, or that didn't happen here, or how things developed. And I was like, oh, there are so many songs that didn't make it. I mean, even that album, believe it or not, doesn't represent all the songs I wrote. I mean, it was a kind of extraordinary time I'm beginning to realize an extraordinary time in my creative life where, like, I had the hunger and the drive and the ideas and the kind of passion right at the same time. I'd been given this extraordinary opportunity. And I wanted to meet it with everything I had. So I really went nuts on the writing. And this is a bit of a weird segue, but before I became a musician and a kind of performer and a writer, I wanted to be a visual artist, and I've always loved, like, I think I always enjoy artist sketchbooks and preliminary sketches, sometimes more than I like the finished painting.
Yeah.
And I like imperfection. And somebody sent me an album of demos by, I think it's called it's like a Howard Ashman bunch of demos. Is it like Howard Sings Ashman or something? I don't know. Okay, well, Ashman Sings Ashman. But it's mostly Alan Menken and Howard Ashman's demos for things like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and stuff like that, and a few things I'd not heard of. And there's a great moment with Arabian Nights where, like, there's a piano vamp. And then Howard Ashman goes, and joke. So it's like dialogue, and joke. And I was like, oh, that's such a having been a one-man band for so long, the idea that you could create the conditions where you would go, somebody, not me, has to write that joke. And I love that. To hear the composer singing is something I really enjoy, and also to see how the original song began and then developed away into the things that it was. I mean, I've been listening to Frank Sings Lesser, which is a great title. Frank Lesser's albums. There's two of them where he sort of rare recordings of him singing songs from Guys and Dolls, or How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And I love his writing so much. He's like, in later years, he's become, a really big kind of mentor for me. And I love hearing how the songs originally intended, and how a composer vocalizes the part, and how they, you can hear in their voice and the way they phrase and their rhythm and their timing exactly what it is they kind of mean to communicate in that song. And I was like, oh, you know what? We're all going to die. We're all going to, there's a pandemic on. Who gives a shit? I'm just going to release them all.
Yeah.
And of course, the tendency was like, oh, do I go back and try and like fix up all the dodgy bits? And I was like, nah, if I do that, I will never stop. And I just have to accept that it is demos and that's it.
Right.
And so even like our music producer Matt Stein was like, well, go back into Logic, and then instead of, most of these are just MP3s, won't you bounce them down in higher resolution? And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of that. If I do that, I will not, they won't get out there.
Yeah.
And so I just sent them to Oscar Zambrano, who's a guy that mastered the Beetlejuice cast recording. And I was like, can you make this so that they all are roughly the same volume, and there's no like terrible frequencies that are going to destroy people's stereos? Because I am not a tech head. I am not a audio guy. I taught myself to make demos. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just get into Logic and I muck around, and that's my sketchbook. And it's fun to show people your sketchbook, because there's a lot about that it's imperfect, and some might even say embarrassing, but there's a trade-off for every bit that's embarrassing or sketchy or out of tune. There's an energy about it that says something about what my intention was when I wrote it, and what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. So I thought that those things, and no one's going to go listening to them unless they're interested. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I got so much out of them. First of all, it was really fun to see that you didn't just lay down piano tracks and then give it to an orchestrator. Like, it was fun to find the places where you're like, oh, the sitar in that song was his idea. You know what I mean? Like, those are really fun nuggets to find.
Yeah.
For me, it did two things. One, there was specifically a demo that I was working on that I was just so obsessing over making it perfect. And partly because nobody knows who I am, so I feel like every demo is like the thing that needs to launch me. And so
Yeah.
the fact that I can listen to them and go, they weren't perfect, and then it took a group of people to get them to where they were, and the story developed and the characters developed. You didn't need to make the whole being dead thing perfect right away for it to become perfect later. You know what I mean? That
No,
was so
no, and
freeing. That was so freeing for me to move on to the next thing.
I know. And when but when you make it, you always think, oh, this is great. This is like exactly how I want it to be. And then it is quite amazing how it develops. And like a song, an opening number that didn't actually make it onto the demo album was a song called a Show About Death. And
Yeah.
In the end, Alex Timbers was like, I just love that, welcome to a show about death bit. Can we steal that and just stick that in the whole being dead thing and then make the whole being dead thing an opening number? And we
Yeah.
were like, yeah. So like, Tom Waits talks about some songs you chop up and use as bait to catch other songs.
Yeah.
And that's really true, like yes, you can write lots of stuff and then and you can go and like strip it for parts sometimes, this doesn't work, but this idea works. What about that idea in this thing? And the more I write, the more kind of spare parts I've got to choose from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and then the other thing that's been fun is just imagining why things were changed. Thinking there's like clearly things, like there's big things like, No Reason has a long has a long ending to it that was taken out, and it kind of gets like more intense. And so thinking through, like, maybe that song just needed to be a lighter moment, just thinking through all those decisions has been really fun. It's almost like a little mystery puzzle for me to think through characters and scenes and all that stuff. I've loved it, all the way down to the little things. Like, I don't know the timeline. Were some of these demos after you started working with actors?
Yeah, some of them were, yeah, like
Because I say that because your Beetlejuice voice changes a little bit in some of the demos, to the point where I was wondering if you had started to be influenced by Alex Brightman's Beetlejuice at some point in your writing. You know what I mean?
oh, that's a really good point. I mean, there's a possibility. I also like just, it's it's really hard when you get a brief and you're like, um, you're going to write Beetlejuice the musical, and you write a song. It's really hard to know how hard to go on the character choices, because like I think in those original ones I was maybe like hedging my bets a little bit because I was trying to find a sweet spot between what I imagine would be like his kind of Tom Waitsy raspy sort of speaks, sort of speaks singing stuff, and then also some kind of sense of melody. And then as it went along, I was like, oh no, this is fun. I'm just going to lean all the way into it and make it kind of like super intense. But yeah, that might have been Brightman's influence. I mean, Brightman was interesting because, he's like he's got like a rock tenor voice. And I was like, do you want me to like transpose these songs up for you? And he was like, no. He's like, no, keep them in your key, because I've got like kind of a bass baritone voice. And he was like,
Yeah.
keep them in your key, and that way I can do the voice and it will never be taxing, and I can just pop up for a few alternates at the end of songs and stuff. So that was really interesting. He knew his voice well enough to know that if he was doing that gravel, but also doing it, at
Yeah.
the very extreme top of his range, he wouldn't have been able to sustain it for 8 shows a week. So that
Yeah.
was good. But
He's incredible. I got to see the
so
show.
good.
I got to see the show with the original cast, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. And I absolutely loved it. Him in particular, he's done like 6 or 7 different variations of that song. Did you write the Tony version of the whole being dead thing, all the different little variations that he's done over the years?
All of them. Yeah, yeah. There was one time when the kind of marketing agency we worked for were like, we're gonna write this version, and I was just like, no. Like, yeah, I was pretty protective of it. Um, you know, partly because, well, mostly because I created it, but also because we really went out on a limb in those early things, especially for the tone. We did like a Good Morning America or like a Hello America. Or I'm not American, so I don't know it had El Roca, and it was like really early in the morning, and they do
Yeah.
this thing called Broadway Week, and people perform in Rockefeller Square Plaza,
Hmm.
and they were like, you want to do the whole being dead thing, and I was like, yeah, but we should rewrite it so it's about like Beetlejuice crashing Good Morning USA or whatever the hell.
Hmm.
God, I can't know what the show's called. And then when it came time to do the Tonys, I mean, the Tonys was like a miracle because none of us expected. What I didn't sort of realize, and this is a big part of my Broadway education, is the Tony Awards are just sort of one award inside a season of awards that
Mm.
includes the Lucille Lortel Awards, the Drama Desk Awards, or the Outer Critics Circle Awards, or the blah blah blah
Sure.
awards. There's so many fucking awards, and Beetlejuice was just getting no love from any of them, and we weren't selling very well for the first 2 weeks, and our reviews were kind of mixed, and so and we opened right at the last night that could possibly qualify for the 2018-2019 season that we're in, and then the Tony nominations were coming out a couple of weeks later, and um, I don't think any of us really expected to get much love because it had not been going well for the rest of the awards. And when we got nominated for 8 awards, and that's a real like a it's a real buzz. Um, but the practical thing is that, if you get nominated for Best Musical, you get to perform. You get 3 minutes,
Yeah.
exactly 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we're all like, what are we going to do? And I was like, I want to rewrite the whole lyric so that it's about Beetlejuice crashing the Tonys. And um, everyone was like, the producers were amazing. They were like, oh, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. Let's pitch that to the Tony Awards. So we went and pitched it, and they were like, okay, so what's it going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't written it yet. And they're like, okay.
You're like, I don't
And
know
I
who's gonna be there. Adam Driver, got it.
that's the only person I knew was going to be there because I knew he was nominated for something.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to have to, and I was really upset about Han Solo.
Yeah.
So I was like, I get to say something here. Um, and also like, finding a finding the hold on to your Patty LaPonies as a rhyme
Hmm.
for Tony's was like I took like a week off when I did that. I was like, yes.
That's it. That's the
I don't
pinnacle.
know. I don't know what it means, um, except it just seemed to work. And that was terrifying because it's Radio City Music Hall. I'd never been in that place until we had rehearsal. Um, so went into rehearsal as, if anyone's ever been inside Radio City Music Hall, it's just the most unbelievable building. And I was like, oh my God, this is so intense. And believe it or not, we'd sort of had the show had sort of had the crap kicked out of us critically out of town. It hadn't gone so well in town. There was this whole kind of like there was a pretty negative like theater community vibe about the show, that it was dead on arrival, that it was
Mm,
another kind of Warner Theatricals big expensive kind of cash grab that didn't really have any heart and soul.
sure.
Um, and so it was like I didn't know what was good anymore, what was good or bad. And I was in
Yeah.
that rehearsal at Radio City Music Hall with all of this whole new lyric, with all these new jokes, and I just had no idea if it was funny or good or not. Um, and even on the night, I had to turn to my wife after I mean, I was in the same aisle, a preset Brightman, like, about 10 seats down from me, and as Beetlejuice getting ready for his bit.
Yeah.
And I looked over, we looked at each other in the ad break, And we both looked fucking terrified. We were both like, this is the most ridiculous swing for the fences, because we don't know if anyone's going to like this show, this music, these
Yeah.
jokes, costume, and to Brightman's credit, like, that dude is like, he feels the fear, but he just goes for it. And and I know that he'd just done Good Morning USA or whatever with a different lyric, that 8 shows a week.
It's Good Morning America, just so you know.
Is it?
Yeah. You were close.
I've got, what have I got? Good Morning USA. What's that? Oh, that's not Family Guy. What's the other one? American Dad.
American Dad.
What is it? Good Morning America.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the Patty LaPone line, that I would retire on that line too. There was in Newsies, there's a line where Alan Menken wrote, "We're gonna make the Delanceys pee their pantsies," and I always just pictured Alan Menken, who is like a god to me, sitting at home writing that line, and it just is. I can't picture him sitting at home writing that line.
I know.
I love things like that.
It's all stupid. It's all so stupid. And like, people come across as so kind of like confident and sure that everything would go the way they want after the fact. Before the fact, everyone's scared. And there's this thing that happens before you open a musical. You do your first preview, and you're in tech, and you start to kind of run it, and you start to stitch together some of the technical elements with the actual running of the show. And till then, it's just been like, stand there and get a light on you, and it's so boring but necessary. But it kind of like is getting together, and then you start to run it, and then you look at the show and you go, this is the biggest piece of shit I have ever seen. This sucks so badly. It's clunky. It's stupid. Why are we doing it's cost everybody so much money, and it's awful. Sometimes you're right, but
yeah,
a lot of the time the thing that's missing is just like it's like a breath of life. It's like once all the technical stuff catches up to the actors, and the actors are able to navigate all that stuff and do the show, there's the kind of magic that connects one scene to another starts to occur, and it becomes a dance, and all of a sudden it becomes a believable world that everybody joins in. But when you keep dropping the ball, or you keep like kind of showing the kind of the springs inside the clock, it's like, this is terrible, which is very scary, because that's the point at which you want the most confidence and you have the least.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big imposter syndrome person. Is that how you went into this? Were you full confident? Were you just ready for them to pull the rug out at any moment? Like, what were your emotions through that entire creation process? And did you ever feel like you landed?
Well, I mean, obviously, not being a New Yorker, being an outsider, there's some positives to that and some negatives to that. One was that the people that I was working with never made me feel like I didn't belong. We just kind of got on with it and just sort of worked on it. But if I ever made the mistake of like trying to listen to what was being said about me or the show outside that circle, then very quickly, you realize that there wasn't quite that degree of kind of no one was really wheeling out the welcome wagon. There was like, who's this fucking dude with a weird name from Australia? Like, and why is he coming in here and taking our jobs? And so I just sort of learned to shut that out a little bit. And it's hard because I've done a lot of, obviously, like a lot of graft in my life. I'm 45 years old. I've been, dedicated my life to writing musicals and songs for the stage, and I worked really hard at it because I love it, but I've done none of that work in front of an American audience. All of it's been done in Australia. So there's no reason why anyone would think anything other than this. Who did this guy fuck to get this job? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Well,
so I recently
I had a bit of that.
I had someone on this podcast who also wrote spec for that show and had that feeling. Wait, who did I lose out to? And not in a disrespect way, just in a you came out of nowhere to them sort of way. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know what it's like. The world is like, you know, we think we kind of know where we sit in the world in the pecking order and who does what. And I know in New York it's a very small it's a small world, and it's the same I think in theatrical communities all over the world. But I guess it's a good it's a good reminder that you never really know you're standing anywhere, and your job is to work really hard.
Yeah.
And for me, it was super weird because I turned up in town. I moved my whole family to New York to sort of follow this dream, and I wouldn't be writing what I write if it wasn't for all of the performances and original Broadway cast recordings and all the incredible writing of all these people that I idolize. There's no way I'd be writing if I didn't have access to that kind of music. And so for me, turning up in New York, whenever I, met someone else, like, and I met a few people that had also pitched on Beetlejuice. I just ring people up and go, "Hey, do you want to go get a beer?"
Yeah.
Because there isn't a huge amount of that in New York. I think people are kind of a look maybe. I mean, people are busy everywhere, but also, there is a kind of competitiveness that goes on.
Yeah.
But my sort of attitude to it was, I wouldn't be doing what I do if I hadn't been inspired and educated in some way by the work that other people have made.
Right.
So it seemed just completely perverse that I would suddenly become a Broadway writer and then hate everybody that I had previously loved.
Sure.
And I'm really, I had a barrier in distance and in overcoming being over the other side of the planet. That was a kind of that made it really difficult to get into Broadway and to write for Broadway.
Right.
But at the same time, it had its real advantages. One of the advantages was, I kind of was able to develop and create my own voice, independently. I had to learn a whole bunch of skills to write, music and lyrics, and to be able to demo songs, and I had to learn how to do that stuff in order to sell my wares. But
Yeah.
also, as I mentioned before, Australia doesn't have that many people, so I'd write a solo show and maybe it had 15 original songs in it, and then I'd go out and tour the show, and I'd maybe get 3 months of touring out of it, tops. And then I'd have to go back and write again.
Yeah.
So, and I was always like, if I was in a country where, 24 million versus what, 345 million people in the United States of America.
Yeah.
That is a huge difference. And I guess that meant I just had to keep going back and writing. And I just, that thing that young writers have that I certainly have, which was, I think I don't have any ideas left. All my ideas have run out. All the best stuff I've already written, it's all done. That I was sort of cured of that pretty quickly in Australia, and it just sort of turned me into a bit more of a disciplined machine. I know that I can sit down and I can write songs, and I know my voice, and that it was a real advantage because I got to do that in Australia away from too much kind of influence. I don't have that. I never had that kind of musical theatre sound. There's a kind of a musical theatre sound. Like
I
for
think
me,
that,
musical
yeah,
theatre
I think there used to
isn't
be.
a genre. It
Yeah, I
used
think
to
that
be. You think it's changed?
I think it has changed. I mean, with what Lin-Manuel Miranda has done, obviously, what Pasek and Paul have made it more of a poppy thing in that direction. I think it can be more than just that old musical theater sound moving forward.
Yes. I mean, I guess it's hard to explain what I mean by kind of like music theatre sound, and I don't mean like swing jazz Broadway kind of like sound. There's it's like a kind of a genre in itself that's sort of formed. And you're right, it has been broken apart, and even people like Joe O'Connor writes really interestingly. Like like he has this really interesting way. You think you're listening to something that sort of fits inside a pop idiom, and you think you know where the hook is, and then he just adds he adds like a new hook, or there's always like
Yeah.
a delicious sort of surprise waiting inside his writing. Like, I really love that. I think it's a super cool way of writing.
So, two questions. First part, is Broadway what you want to keep doing? Are you working on a show right now? Not to say specifics if that's a thing, but is that what you want to
Yeah.
do moving forward?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what it was, I didn't know what life would be like post Beetlejuice, I was like, oh, am I going to have like, um, offers to write other shows?
Yeah.
And that never really happened. Um, which is kind of, I mean, there's a few ideas have come up, but having written, Beetlejuice, which was exactly the right idea for me at the right time. I just knew in my bones it was right. And then songs for I wrote songs for King Kong, and I think I made a real mistake with that because um, I thought because I was writing at more of a distance, like there was a guy writing the actual sort of musical score, and then it was like a kind of a really big organization, actually, King Kong, with lots of different moving parts, and I was a smaller part of that machine.
Yeah. The
I was like, hey,
Wikipedia
I was
on that
writing,
show is really confusing. I just
yeah.
how
Oh
many
well,
times it changed hands and
I mean, I was on the inside of some of it, and I still don't understand it. But I resonated with the audacity of that show.
Mhm.
Like I was like, oh, I believed in the puppet, and I believed in the creatives, um, and so we set to work, but I don't think we really kind of were writing the same show. And then there's other stuff going on, but I think just to talk about kind of like creativity, it was a little outside of my. I think about what my skills are. My skills are probably black comedy, and it was impossible to be funny inside of it, at least in the way that I like to be
Sure.
funny. And so I felt kind of hemmed in by it, and then I was like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, that and Beetlejuice were the things that allowed me to actually be able to come to New York and work on those shows. And, I always had this thing that I wanted to be a part of that experience to see it through to its conclusion. And it was a tricky thing, but, it taught me what to say yes and what to say no to, and what my
Sure.
strengths and weaknesses are, and to be a little bit more realistic about that. And that was a scary way to learn that lesson, but it was still a good lesson to learn. And now I go, I've been through the process of making a musical a few times now, and I know how arduous it is, and I know how hard it is, even when you've got the best, most appropriate idea for yourself. You're still going to wake up at 3 a.m. going, is this the worst? Is this the worst idea I've ever had in my life? And so, you really need to you need to be in love, totally in love, before you get married. And now I'm a little bit like, look, that's a great idea. That's a great show. I'll pay my hard-earned money to sit there and watch that show. But I know
Yeah.
that I'm not the writer to write that show. So I have a bit of that going on. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I'm writing two shows for America with American creators collaborating, and then I'm writing another third musical for Australia for my old, yeah, for a drama school, actually. It's a commission.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then second part of the question, Beetlejuice goes on tour in America, and I know that it comes to LA this summer. I'm very excited about that. There's
Oh, in
rumors
the
of
summer,
like,
is that when it arrives?
yeah, like July. Um,
Awesome.
there's rumors of West End, there's rumors of Pro Shots, there's always Netflix just crushed it with Matilda. What's the future of Beetlejuice as you're able to say it today?
Oh, well, I just got sent I just got sent a Japanese translation. So it's going to Japan, which I'm really excited about because I've never been to Japan and I want to go.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's going to Brazil. There's been rumors about the West End, but I think that's actually I think that I was like, why is people were emailing me? Is it true? Someone got a casting brief for the show in London, and then I worked out what was going on. There's actually we we created a version of Beetlejuice to go on a cruise ship. Uh,
which will not be starring Alex Brightman.
No, I don't. Well, it might. I don't know if he'd be up for that. But that's casting out of the UK and the United States, I think. And I don't know when that's happening. It's such a bonkers idea, but I love it. We're really happy for it to go wherever. And I wanted to rewrite it so that Beetlejuice would be like the captain of the ship with like a nautical themed hat, and you're all gonna die.
Yeah. Hi, I'll be your guide still works.
I know. Some iceberg jokes. It'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
So yes, that it rolls on a pace, and the touring cast is so good. Like, there's always a bit where you do end up writing for specific voices as you're developing a show, and having the first rate cast that we did with Kerry Butler, Rob McClure, Alex Brightman, Sophia Ann Caruso, Leslie Kritzer, Adam Danheiser, these incredible comic actors that are so funny. And so specifically funny. You write into them. You absolutely do. You kind of tailor the suit to, sometimes I go, oh, this joke will only work because I know Alex Brightman will nail it. And so there's a fear that when you go and take the material and you give it to another cast, it's like, is it just going to be like ill-fitting clothing? But we were so blown away by the touring company, how funny they were, but in a really different way. And it's so exciting because you're like, oh, okay, I never even, it's like hearing the scenes in you. The scenes which are, the book writing that Anthony and Scott did is just so funny and so warm and beautiful. And to hear it done in a completely different way has been awesome. So it's heartening to know that it can go to other places. And I'm just excited. I think they're in Detroit at the moment, the Detroit Opera House.
Fun. So we got to switch gears a little bit. All right. The reason why I started this podcast was, one, to get behind the scenes of seeing the whole elephant of what people do, but also faith journeys, God, no God, spirituality, how you get through life. Very open-ended, agenda-free. What has been your relationship with religion, faith, spirituality, all of that? What has your relationship been like with those things throughout your life?
Well, I was raised a Catholic, and that meant it meant going to a Catholic primary school and a Catholic high school, and I went to church every Sunday. I was an altar boy for a little bit.
Nice.
And I actually, because I went to a Catholic high school, by the time I was about 15, I stopped going to church. I think my family kind of all at the same time got frustrated with the lack of progression in the Catholic Church, especially around gender, around attitudes towards women, which we just kind of found were increasingly at odds with our collective view of women's sort of worth and equality in the world. And I don't know, like, Catholicism is a super weird one because it's kind of like a pragmatic religion. Like, if you really push a Catholic to the point of what is going on here in the mass, you find very quickly there are these elements of things like this, for example, the notion of transubstantiation, which when you
Sure.
bless the wine and the
Yeah.
bread, that it not metaphorically, but literally transforms into the blood and body of Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
which, you know, that's that's a leap that I'm not prepared to take.
Yeah.
And
And what a
um,
and what a weird leap. Like why does that make it
it's
any more special? Right?
look, to be honest, my experience of Catholicism and Catholics was that they were really pragmatic, and that most people, to be honest, just sort of like cherry picked.
Yeah.
And not, I don't mean they cherry picked the ethics. I think the ethics are actually the core of it. And now that I'm, I would call myself a lapsed Catholic, but it wasn't until I was in New York and I was asking somebody about their relationship to Judaism that they were like, well, I'm kind of like, I'm not a practicing Jew. I'm like a cultural Jew,
Mm.
you know, like you would be like a cultural Christian. And I'd never even heard someone put it like that, where it's like you don't necessarily, um, you know, I would call myself probably an atheist feels weird. I would call myself like a secular humanist, which is basically the teachings of Jesus with the magic taken out. That's what I would say. The Catholic Church has always been about education. It's been about, you know, providing for people who are less fortunate. It's about the kind of courage it takes um, to love and accept over, being kind of exclusionary and rejecting other people through fear. Um,
Yeah.
and those principles and values are ones that social justice values that I absolutely, I'm a kind of a lefty from way back. I would say, yeah, it's Jesus without the magic. And that there was something obviously quite revolutionary about Jesus's teachings and Jesus's approach to life and to money. And I feel like the church bears very little resemblance a lot of the time to
Yeah.
that. There's a lot of very wealthy people in the name of religion who are trying to fit through the eye of a needle. And so, yeah, I also feel like institutions are man-made, are human-made, and institutions are fallible. And the Catholic Church, like any church, I believe, is sort of subject to the same rules that the local tennis court is, or the badminton club, or the art club, or the chess club, or it's a club, and
Yeah.
it's a hierarchy, and people have their little bits of power and their place. But really, what it is, it's a governing, organizing principle that allows people to come together and share in community and have a kind of an idea about how they should be towards each other. But as I've kind of gotten older, I don't know what my dad's relationship to Catholicism is. He's sort of in and out a little bit, but I would say that I'm a lapsed Catholic, and I think about it in terms of I had a chat to someone who was still a Catholic, and they were talking about. I mean, they did this. They did amazing volunteer work, and they were working in. Actually, we met working in a. I volunteered in a hospice for a while for sort of like palliative care for men, mostly men who are dying of HIV/AIDS,
Mm.
and it's amazing to think that happened in my lifetime because that wouldn't really happen anymore now with modern medicine kind of eradicating that. But um, it was, I remember talking to this friend, and she was like, the notion of compassion for another human being is about seeing the Christ in them, seeing the divinity in them. And I thought that was really interesting because secular humanism is exactly the same thing, seeing the
Yeah.
dignity inside a person, that they're worthy of love and care and grace and all those things, but not because they're created in the image of God necessarily, but because they are another human being, and that
Yeah.
that we have to decide that we have worth, and that as a species, everywhere we've gotten successfully, we've gotten there by working together. And the best cultures and the best societies, I believe, are ones that are cohesive and inclusive and allow people the freedom to, to be who they are, to disagree, but to come together in a kind of a sense that, that we all have value and worth. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my vibe.
No, I love that you said so many great things in there, and seeing the divinity in others. That's really interesting because it was about 3 years ago that I did this podcast with Tim Minchin, who, obviously kind of shares a lot of your same views that you just said. And me growing up in a Christian background and still working at a Christian church right now, we were
Yep.
talking about how we share so many morals and values and we line up on so many things. And it was interesting because we just got to the point where we just had to say it's either evidence of no God or God. It's either evidence that it's a God that's in all things, that's revealing himself through nature, and that's why we're all experiencing this oneness, that we can recognize the divinity in each other, or it's no God, that it's all just the human community experience all has led us to this oneness and understanding. And it's almost like, to me, it feels very much like the same thing in a different language, for the way I experience it. But that's how I live, in a very loving, generous, giving Christian community. And I don't think that's representative of the whole, at least in America right now. I don't know what Christianity is like in Australia. The only thing I know about Australian Christianity is Hillsong, which in and of itself is a big power structure, like you were saying.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know either. It's certainly an interesting one because like where you summarize where you and Tim got to is exactly right. But on the way there, it's about where you put your focus and attention, and also like kind of, I don't know, like I actually, when I think, when I stop and talk about it, like we're talking about it now, you're sort of forced to go, oh, these are, intellectually, this is how I articulate what my values are. But really, that's not where my values are. My values are like just in just every interaction I have with people every single day.
Yeah.
And it's in the way I raise my kids, and it's the way I talk to the school and other people. And sometimes I'm kind of like really kicking goals and I feel like I'm a good version of myself. And sometimes I'm a less good version of myself. And then sometimes I think, um, why do I write musicals? It's so bloody hard. And I could, part of me wants to go, I say to my wife, I want to open one of those like pop-up food trucks and just make sandwiches for people. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, you wouldn't like that. You get really bored. And she's probably right. But I'm always struck by this kind of notion that you know, our big picture philosophies don't actually, I don't know what difference they make on the day-to-day stuff, like how to work on your relationships with people, how to be a better communicator. Are you coming across the way you think you're coming across with other people? Like, I like watching Survivor, that TV show Survivor.
Sure.
I mean, that's really interesting because there's essential nature and personality in all of us that we all live in this gap between who we are and who we like to think we are. And
Yeah.
that's like, when you go and you buy pants at a shop and you're like, they're a bit tight, but the person that, this person that I hope to be, or that I think I is gonna like actually lose a bit of weight, so it's gonna be all good.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a weird, we're all stuck in that kind of gap. And if we're lucky, we can kind of shrink it down. I guess I'm just saying that, it's one thing to have a big picture philosophy, but I think, do you think everybody, I think everybody thinks they're a good person. I've never met anyone that's like, I'm a bit of an asshole. But I wonder whether, you know, I wonder, I wonder whether our overarching philosophies actually help us be good people. Do you think?
On the day to day, I think it
Yeah,
has
because
to. I
we've
think
all
it
met
has to
we've
at
all met
least lay
people
a
in church.
foundation. Doesn't it have to at least
Like
lay
a
a
roadmap.
foundation?
Yeah, but it doesn't work on some people. Like I've met the most religious people who, you know,
Yeah.
cannot conquer their own ego or their selfishness
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
their judgment or their like they're
Well,
like
I'll tell you what I've been struggling with lately, because I'm work at a church, but I'm very open with my doubts the and all those things. So this won't come as a surprise to people, and this is not like gonna lose me my job. Everyone knows. The thing I've been struggling with right now is, if there's a God who's that created everything and is great and the most perfect, most beautiful, most awe-inspiring thing, why isn't there more? First of all, why isn't there more of a collective oneness in how we're acting? Why are there so many different versions of Christianity? Why are there some people that I can sit next to on a Sunday, week after week, and have completely different views? Then that makes no sense to me, that we're not being drawn to a same specific thing. So that's the first part. The second part for me is, if he's all great and powerful and the greatest good, why is it that he's the greatest good unless I'm a little horny, or unless I have a little bit of an ego, or unless someone cuts me off on the freeway? Like, those all seem like such minute things in the presence of what is supposed to be this almighty God, that distract me from being the good person, that I'm the best version of myself that I'm supposed to be because of him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, one way of looking at it is that they're potentially linked in that religion is, well, like any big cultural idea, um, a governing principle for a huge amount of people who were once in little tiny tribes,
Sure.
who then, who are now connected. Like we human beings as a species never meant to be globally connected in the way they
Mm.
were. But as that expands out and more people need to get along and coexist, then I think, religion has been a great governing principle. Let's not kill each other. Let's not
Mm.
fuck each other's wives. Let's respect each other's property. Let's, let, let let's kind of create this idea that there is, somebody that cares about us, but also someone's going to pull us into line if we're doing the wrong thing, so that it's not like, oh, I won't get busted because this creature or this entity is omnipresent, omniscient,
Yeah.
and you can't hide from it. Um, and everybody has sort of kind of arrived at that idea in a different way. And I don't think that negates the idea that there is a God. But if there is God, he's like, you know, probably sitting there going, he or she, or probably beyond gender, um, everybody's kind of like got the basic idea. The basic idea is that, we need to collaborate and to cooperate and respect each other and love each other and explore what it means to be human and to look after our children and to educate them and to, keep kicking the can down the road. And they're all kind of got the right idea that the world, there's something, that we're all better if we're acting in the service of something. I always think about service as being a really important thing. And I don't even see that as a religious thing. I see that as just like, if you were, working in service of your family,
Yeah.
I make my kids lunches and I cook dinner, and sometimes I really give them the shits and it's tiring, but I, I, even writing musicals, or, I find that acts of service take me out of just thinking about myself all the time. I think they've obviously, all these religions have got the same idea,
Yeah.
something bigger than yourself, a bigger idea, a bigger thing to aim for. And when it comes to the specific things like, moral failings and stuff like that, I mean, some religions, yeah, they're pretty loose. I like Judaism. I feel like Judaism is like, yeah, God, there's a kind of an idea, but don't stress too much. These are the kind of basic principles of what this particular ritual is about, but you can put your own spin on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I love Judaism. Basically for me, I'm at the point where I'm like anything that's about community, eating food,
mm,
making music together, laughing, generosity. For me, that's a big kind of cultural thing. And I think that religion has helped create that. And I think that in our modern life, where we're all so dislocated, especially in cities, religion a church can bring people into its center and keep them there. And that's a really terrific thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the rules stuff. I'm like,
yes,
I go,
no,
who are you hurting? I feel like Christianity has a lot more of those rules, a lot more of those moral rules, which like I think makes people a little bit fucked up. And I wonder whether like, if there was a little word from God going, you know what, you're a human being, an element of horniness, a few weird thoughts. Like there's going to be like some crazy shit going on the inside of your head. That's
yeah,
normal. Like we all stand on a New York subway station and we think, wow, what if I just push this old woman in front of a train? Or like, I used to work at Red Rooster and there's a deep fryer for the chips, and I was like, what if I just stuck my whole hand in that deep fryer? You know what I mean? Or what if I jumped off this building? We
sure,
think messed up thoughts and we dream messed up dreams
yeah,
because our brains are these vital active things that want to examine every possibility, but it's not what we think. It's not the stupid clumsy things that we occasionally say. It's the
yeah,
stuff that we actually do that I think defines our character.
yeah. No, I mean, and the I think the funny thing is, if you were to make a list of those morals and things that you think Christianity kind of leans into, probably a little too far, they probably would be things that Jesus never said. It would probably be old Levitical law things or things that Paul said after Jesus, but not actual things that Jesus said himself. It seemed like he didn't care as much about that as he cared about hanging out with people and washing feet and being with them.
I agree, and the miracle stuff. Like people get hung up on the miracle stuff, but I think it is miraculous to not have much food, and instead of going right, there's like I'm about to give a speech on the mountain here, and there's like a lot of what was it, 5,000 people
Mm-hmm.
turned up, and he wasn't expecting that big a crowd, so they have this tiny amount of food, and of course, what do you do socially when you haven't got enough to feed people? You got two choices. The first choice is to go, all right, well, we'll just draw a circle within the larger circle that we'll eat this food, right? And then
Yeah, sure.
everyone else can just kind of take care of yourself. But the bigger miracle is to go, no, we're going to try and share it amongst everybody. And like a little bit of something, a tiny little bit of something that's for everyone is way more powerful than nothing.
Yeah.
It's the intention of sharing even beyond what you have. And that is selflessness and generosity. And that is what's miraculous. Not that suddenly it expands into heaps of stuff. I always think about the water into wine. And my favorite line from the Bible by far is, and you'll know it better than me because I can't quote Bible verses, but at the end of the night, everyone's fucking pissed out of their mind on this wine at the wedding, and then they've run out, and Jesus turns the water into wine, and everybody starts drinking it, and isn't the line it's amazing because Jesus normally people serve the best wine first, and then people get drunk, and then they just bring out the terrible shit from
Sure.
the cellars that no one wants because everyone's too drunk to know. But he
Yeah.
served the best wine at the end, and I'm like, that is the miracle.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't have people don't do that. And whenever I read, like again, it's like Jesus with the magic taken out makes absolute sense to me. When my kids are like, I want to invite like 98% of the class to my party, but there's like 2% of people in my class that I don't really know. I don't really get along with them. It's a bit weird. And of
Yeah.
course, you like invite them, invite everyone. It's way easier just to have everyone there than to try and manage. hurt feelings. Like, just, set a bigger table.
Yeah.
Generosity, be generous. Don't be a stingy ass. Like, being generous leads to generosity and good vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Jesus's best quality was that he was hostable, that he didn't alienate himself from anybody. Everyone was inviting him places, everyone was inviting him into their homes. And there's so much of Christianity, especially in America, that is not hostable. There's no way anyone would invite these people anywhere, not to mention getting into a whole discussion of its connection with politics and all those things. But this has been unbelievably refreshing. I can't even tell you. I get lost in the arguing with Christians inside of our little box. And most of the arguments happen about the magic part. And is this real? Is this not real? And stepping outside of that and just hearing other people trying to be good people and the best humans they can be is incredibly refreshing.
Yeah, I don't think the magic matters. I don't think the magic is what people take away.
Yeah.
I think about the miracles a lot. I think about, like, even, like Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. Like, there's a bit of pseudo psychological stuff that goes on with Guramo when he, like, but most of the time these are people who are isolated, haven't had much attention, they've kind of given up on themselves,
Mm,
and they have these five flamboyant, charismatic guys, presumably a television crew and all the sandwiches and the catering they bring and all that sort of shit,
sure.
come in and just shower them with attention and love. And it's like watering a fucking dried up plant. You see them kind of come to life, and having somebody believe in them makes them believe in themselves, and they, and a reason to try and to say you're worthy of taking care of yourself, and they believe it.
Yeah.
And that's a miracle. Like, that's what the whole, I think, raising up Lazarus, it's just like giving the guy a bit of love and attention,
Yeah.
lepers that nobody has touched, nobody has hugged, nobody has spoken to, everybody turns away repulsed. And there's this guy that actually sort of sees them and
Yeah.
lays his hands on them. I mean, that's the miracle. Putting
Right.
aside your fear in order to give love. For me, that's always the miracle, and it's not magically cured. I get that's a good communicating tool, but that's not the point, I don't think.
Sure, sure. Does it matter that Jesus healed the guy, or does it matter that his friends carried him across the town, went up on the roof, cut a hole in the roof? His friends lowered him down to Jesus. They did that for their friend. Isn't that more of the important part of the story than the fact that Jesus healed him?
Yeah, and the fact that we are actually capable of doing that for other people in our community, and I think we know that. I think we know that we have the power to, like, brighten somebody's day or make something easy for somebody, or just walk past somebody in the street and have an interaction that makes you and them smile. And for me now in my, like, my world, I've got a family, and it's a little, and my world is pretty sort of small, and my day to day is like grocery shopping and ferrying kids around.
Mm,
It's like they're the miracles where you've got an opportunity to help, and you help, and it counts.
yeah.
Like, that's miraculous.
Yeah. Man, this has been so awesome. I appreciate you doing this
Yeah,
so much.
you
This is
too,
just
Eric.
this has
Lovely
been
chatting.
thrill. Yeah, man. Thank you.